channel. If you're new here, welcome. So today I'm going to be wrapping up my mini Avengers Endgame series, and what better way to finish it than with the big boy Thanos. And not only am I going to be showing you how to create and apply the prosthetics in this tutorial, but I'm also going to be showing you how you can create his helmet and his armor as well. I'm even going to be showing you how to revamp this $11 gauntlet on Amazon just to make it look a little bit more appropriate and not so cheap. And honestly, it's super easy. It's basically the same steps that you can take when making your armor look nicer as well. Now, just a disclaimer, this is the very first time I have ever made any kind of cosplay costume using EVA foam. Cosplayers do this all the time, and I definitely felt like Thanos needed this in order to be a complete character, so I decided to challenge myself by giving it a shot. So I will be showing you how to create the armor. This one is going to be a little bit more in depth because I completely freehanded this one. However, I will highly recommend you guys check out Odin Makes here on YouTube because I was following his tutorial in order to create this helmet. Now, I'm still going to be going over some of these steps I took when making his helmet. However, you just definitely need to check him out because this was very helpful, especially for the first time creating any kind of costume, to figure out exactly what I was going to do so that way I could create the armor without that much trouble. I mean, he literally has the template for the helmet, so he's just helping you as much as he possibly can. So like I said, I'm going to be showing you a few of the steps. However, it's not going to be as in-depth as the armor tutorial simply because there's already a tutorial on YouTube for that, which is the one I was following in order to make this. So anyways, without further ado, if you guys are interested in seeing how I can achieve this entire Thanos ensemble, then just keep watching. Hey guys, so since this is going to be quite a long video since there's so much to cover, I'm going to be leaving timestamps right here for you guys so you can skip to whatever you need to see, or you could watch the entire thing. It is completely up to you. I just thought that this might be a little bit more helpful for those of you who are looking for a specific thing in this video. So to get started, we are going to be making Thanos' helmet. Now, like I said in the intro, I am following Odin Makes tutorial, so this is going to be the Walmart version of the Chanel vs. Walmart, because I definitely took some creative liberties, or I like to call them lazy liberties, because either I didn't have everything necessary, or I just didn't go the distance. So the products I'm using for this tutorial are 5mm and 2mm craft EVA foam, which you can find at Michael's. It might be hidden. They even have rolls there. You just have to ask someone to help you, and they literally have so much of it, you just don't always see it right off the bat. And you're going to want to print out Odin Makes template for this helmet. Something to keep in mind is he does have a measurement scale on the paper that you have to pay attention to. For me, because I didn't print off the same kind of paper he did, I had to go into Microsoft Word, resize it, and also change the percentage because I have a smaller head than him. You also need a heat gun, 2 different kinds of spray paints. You could just use one, but I personally liked having the different dimension in the spray paints, one being a little bit more of a flat gold and then the other being a little bit more reflective in specific places. You also need something round to help shape your heated EVA foam. I'm personally just using this mason jar. However, I have seen a lot of cosplayers use a metal sphere. I'm also going to be using polyacrylic, some liquid cement, a variety of gold and purple paints, some scissors, a box opener, a white paint pen or piece of chalk to be able to trace onto the EVA foam, and some safety gloves. So to get started, I'm going to be taking my printed out templates and going through each design and cutting them out with my scissors. Once I'm done that, I'm going to be tracing each design onto the black EVA foam, following the directions to see if I'm going to be tracing them onto 5mm or 2mm EVA foam. He also does use 10mm, but I personally just skipped that part and just stuck with the 2 and the 5. I personally used 5 for the base of the helmet, and I would use 2 for the detail pieces. Don't forget to follow the directions on the piece of paper and duplicate the items as directed. Once that's completed, make sure to mark which is the left side and which is the right side of the helmet, and go through them and add tack marks so that whenever you glue them together that they will line up perfectly. This is really going to help you in the long run when trying to figure out where exactly to glue each piece to its opposite side. Then you're just going to continue doing this with the rest of the pieces given, turn on some nice music, and enjoy the ride. have all of your pieces cut out and set aside, you're going to be moving back to the base of the helmet, which is the two largest pieces that you have. I'm going to be taking my heat gun and making sure to heat the side opposite that we marked. So on the side that you have written left, you want to flip it over and heat that side so that it will start to invert, and that is the side that is going to be pressed against your head. This is really going to help round it out. Make sure you don't overheat it, otherwise it will start to warp. Just heat it until you can actually mold with it, roll it around the round object, and you're going to help shape it. You're also going to be doing the same thing with your large crescent shapes as well, because this is what you're actually going to be gluing together first. So in order to do that, you're going to be marking up your darts that you have already drawn on, and taking your liquid cement, you're going to be applying a little bit of that halfway on, molding them together, making sure to line up the darts, waiting until it dries, and then just continuing down the rest of the EVA foam. This can be a little tricky, so just make sure that you're patient in holding on to it until it is completely dry. You are then going to be taking your large base pieces, and one by one you're going to be connecting the darts to the darts on the crescent as well. Next, we're going to be taking the eyepieces that we cut out earlier and making sure to heat and mold those into a rounded shape, so then we can take our liquid cement and glue those on to the eyepiece of the base plate. I'm then going to be taking what I like to incorrectly call a shield, and I'm just going to be rounding that and gluing that to the back of the helmet to kind of form a tail. Next, we will be gluing on Aang's arrowhead to the very center of the helmet. Next, I'm going to be taking Odin's Zippity Doodahs, and this is actually where I messed up. I actually was supposed to put another piece down before this, and I didn't realize that until 30 minutes later. So we have this, and then I ended up putting that on top later, and it kind of just makes my own, Thanos helmet. It's unique, it's fine, even though it's wrong, but it's fine. I'm then going to be taking the cheek pieces that are cut out of the 2mm foam, and I'm just going to be gluing that on to the helmet as well. Now, of course, there were plenty more things to glue on, but that is where I'm going to refer you guys over to Odin's channel to really get all of the details. Otherwise, we would probably be here for the exact same length that he was making his tutorial, and we have a lot to cover. I'm then going to be taking my box cutter, since this was readily available, and just carving in some details using some reference photos of his helmet to try and make this look as much like Thanos's as possible. Once that is finished, you are ready to paint. Take your helmet outside or into a well-ventilated room, and you're going to be applying 2 coats of the metallic gold spray paint, letting that dry in between each coat before a final coat of the reflective gold spray paint. Once that's completely dry, feel free to take your helmet and add a few more details to your liking. I wanted to add more dimension, so I'm going to be taking a variety of gold paints, and I'm just going to be hand painting each area, definitely applying it to the edges to add some shading, and applying a mix of purple and black into the areas that he has purple coloring. I'm then going to be taking my brown paint and filling in the areas that we made with our box cutters, and then we're going to be taking a wet paper towel and just lightly brushing away the excess so that this can really fall into the cracks and deepen and darken those areas. And last but not least, I'm going to be taking my polyacrylic, and I'm going to be applying this all over the helmet, starting with the gold before moving into the purple in case the color happens to bleed. And that is your completed Thanos helmet. And moving on, we're going to be starting his chest piece. Now, unfortunately, since I did freehand all of this, I don't have templates for you guys, but believe it or not, as intimidating as this might look, it is actually very simple shapes that you're going to be making, especially when you have the foam as a reference. For this tutorial, I used 2mm EVA foam, a heat gun, my metallic gold spray paint and my reflective gold spray paint, a mason jar to use to help mold the EVA foam when using the heat gun, my liquid cement, my glossy polyacrylic, and a variety of gold and purple paints, some scissors, a box cutter, a white marker or a pen in order to trace onto the EVA foam, some Velcro, and your safety gloves. To start off with my design, I'm going to be taking my 2mm foam that I got from Michaels, and I held this up to my body to kind of figure out where I wanted this to go and how big I wanted it to be. So the midpoint of this shape actually happened to be absolutely perfect for the 2 pieces that I wanted on each side of my body. A really great idea is to pull up reference photos of Thanos, and I'm just looking at the shape of his armor and where it falls, and I'm just going to be replicating that onto the EVA foam. Once that is completed, you can then cut out your shape using your scissors. Make sure you label this as the right side, flip it over, and then you're going to be tracing the same shape, cutting out a duplicate and labeling that as the left side. Once that is all cut up, I am holding up the pieces that we just cut out to a blank piece of foam, and I'm just going to be cutting out a shape that I want to go right up against this. And of course, make sure to cut that out. Just like the other tutorial, you want to make sure to create darts on the pieces where they're going to be connecting, so whenever we glue them together, you have a guideline of what attaches to what. You're then going to be taking the smaller piece of foam, holding that up against an unused piece of foam, and you're going to be tracing the accessory pieces that we're going to be gluing on top of that small piece, once again making sure to duplicate these so that you have some for the left side as well. Once again, make sure to be consistent with drawing on the darts so you know where everything is going to go. We're then going to be taking some more EVA foam and we're going to be creating the back of the armor. Now, this for me wasn't as important. I really didn't take too much care in making this look as perfect because this is just for this tutorial. However, if you do plan on doing a full-on costume piece, this is definitely something that you might want to focus on more and maybe do a different design. So I'm just going to be taking the pieces that we cut out earlier, flipping them upwards, and then cutting out those pieces and holding them up against what we already have. I also recommend going through each piece and labeling left, right back, and left back. I'm then going to be taking my heat gun and heating up those pieces and shaping that around my mason jar so that they are rounded and that they will fit your chest. Especially if you have a bust, this is definitely something that you want to be aware of. Next, we can go ahead and glue these together. I'm going to be taking my liquid cement and applying it to each piece of foam, letting that get tacky before sticking them together, making sure to line up the darts. I personally like to work my way down the piece of foam, starting with the top half and then applying a little bit more on the bottom half so that the entire thing doesn't dry when you're pressing a piece of it together. And of course, you want to do the same exact thing with the left side as well. Once you have finished the left side, we're also going to be doing the back. So just like you curved the front pieces, you want to curve the back pieces, glue the right back with the other right back, and also glue the left back with the other left back before moving on to gluing the right back to the right front. I personally found this to be easier, having them be in two long lines and just gluing those together as opposed to trying to do them each individually. Once that is done, we are now going to be gluing on the accent pieces to both the left front and the right front. I'm then going to be creating some darts between the right side and the left side before taking my liquid cement and gluing these two pieces together. You also want to do the same thing with the back side as well. Next, we're going to be making the collar on the armor, so in order to do this, I'm using reference photos, just kind of figuring out the shape of it. I'm going to be copying out what I think it looks like on the EVA foam, pulling that aside and cutting it out before duplicating it for the left side. And just like before, you want to make sure to heat these up so that they start to take shape. This one, I actually didn't even need to use the mason jar because if you heat it up enough, it already starts to warp itself. And I'm going to be gluing each of these two left pieces together, making sure to glue one on top of the other so it adds a little bit more dimension and height. And just like before, you want to make sure that you create a back piece as well. Now, the back piece for me didn't have nearly as much detail just because I personally didn't see the necessity of it. But once again, if you want a full-on accurate Thanos armor, I would definitely take into account the details that are held in the back of the armor. You're then going to be applying the liquid cement to the back of the chest piece and on the front of the collar portion, sticking this out under, adjusting it to where it needs to be, and just going ahead and gluing that down. Next, I'm going to be taking a scrap piece from the helmet template that we used earlier, and I'm just going to be tracing this onto the EVA foam and then making 4 of those and cutting those out. These are going to be right 1, right 2, left 1, and left 2, even though they all happen to be the same size. And I'm only going to be using the heat gun on the very edges of this piece so that they start to curl upwards. And then going to be applying the glue to the upper portion of the chest piece, up where the shoulder is, and just gluing one at a time before going in with the second one and applying that right under the other rounded shoulder pad. I'm then going to be gluing down the back collar pieces, and I'm actually going to be curling these at an angle so that way whenever you wear the armor, it actually starts to lift upwards like Thanos does in the movie. I'm then going to be taking these detail templates from the helmet tutorial, and I'm going to be tracing some of those to use for the very center of the chest plate. I actually cut out 5 of these, and you're going to be gluing this on to that little square semicircle piece that you have, making sure that this adds some nice elevated details that is going to go in the very center back of your chest piece. You're then going to be heating this with a heat gun, molding it around your mason jar so that it has some shape, and then you're going to be gluing this right behind the chest piece so that the little details peek through the very center. I'm then going to be cutting some straps from EVA foam to use to hold my chest piece together while I'm filming my makeup tutorial. So this I am actually going to be cutting lengthwise, and it happened to be the perfect size for my body. So to make this stick together, I'm going to be taking some Velcro, gluing that to the ends of the straps and also right behind the very front bottom pieces of the chest plate. And once we're done with that, we're going to be going back into our box cutter and just cutting in some details like we did for the helmet to help add a little bit more dimension to this and make it look a little bit more realistic. Now, something you can do is if you want this to be a worn piece of armor like Thanos has in both Endgame and Infinity War, I highly recommend you take that with either a wood burner or just using this. I wanted mine to be pristine and nice in case I wanted to use this for another tutorial in the future. We're then going to be hiding that center seam by taking 2 flag-like pieces of EVA foam and just gluing that down and using our box cutter to add a few ridges and details to that piece. You're then going to be taking your armor outside and spraying it with 2 coats of the gold metallic spray paint, letting it dry in between each coat, and then taking your reflective gold spray paint and just spraying that on top. And since this is a very 3-dimensional costume piece, make sure to spray a little bit of spray paint onto the underside of the armor as well. Next, we're just going to be adding a few little fun details such as highlights and contours into the armor. So I'm just going to be taking a variety of my gold paints and I'm just going to be shading the edges so that it has a little bit more dimension. Feel free to take some darker colors to scruff it up, make it look a little bit damaged like we mentioned earlier, and also use some lighter colors to add some nice highlights throughout the piece. Now, something I personally like to do is use the darker bronze colors and the browns to apply into the creases and then take a wet paper towel to help blend that out. I will then be creating a mixture of my black and purple paint, and I'm just going to be lightly marking out the areas that I want to paint so I don't get confused later on, because I most certainly would, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill in those areas. This is something that I did have to do about 2 to 3 coats for it to be completely opaque and cover the gold. I'm then going to be taking my polyacrylic and just applying this all over the armor, starting off with the gold before moving on to the purple, so that way if the purple bleeds, it doesn't get all over the gold that we just painted. And that is your completed Thanos armor tutorial. Next, we're going to be making Thanos' gauntlet, and by this I mean we're actually going to be doing a revamp of this already made Thanos gauntlet that was really cheap off of Amazon. So I'm going to start off by just taking a gold paint that I got from Walmart, the really cheap ones, the ones that are really watered down. Those are actually absolutely perfect for this. And I'm just going to be applying this all over the gauntlet except for the areas that have the stones, and then I'm going to be taking a copper color and just applying this to the areas that would have a little bit more shading and contour. So this is going to be the sides and also up by the fist. I'm then going to be taking a dark brown paint and I'm just going to be applying this over the areas that have the designs and ridges, and I'm actually going to be recommending using a wet paper towel if you need to help blending any of this together. If anything happens to be too harsh, a wet paper towel will be your best friend. And for the areas that require deep shading, I'm going to be taking my black, mixing it with some of the brown, and I'm just going to be applying this to the areas that require that shading, and once again making sure to blend that out so it doesn't look too harsh. And last but not least, you're going to be taking your polyacrylic and applying this all over the gauntlet except for the areas that have these stones. This is really going to give it a nice reflective finish, and that is your completed Thanos gauntlet. Next, we're finally moving on to creating the prosthetic. You want to start off by taking some petroleum jelly and applying this all over your life cast. You then want to take your liquid latex and starting off by stippling that to the underside of the chin using a sponge and laying down some strips of cotton. You're going to want to slowly build this up. Thanos in some pictures has a square chin, in some he has a round, so I kind of decided to go for that squoval, which it seems to have in the movie, but it's completely up to you. So once you have that completely built up, you can then start to create vertical stripes that are going to kind of give you a rough guide of where each individual line is going to be in his chin indentations. Following that, I'm going to be taking some liquid latex and flour, and I'm going to be mixing that into latex paste, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You want to mix it until you have a nice paste-like consistency, and we're going to be building up the jawline area. I personally like to go back and forth between applying the latex paste and applying some liquid latex onto my finger and just smoothing out the area as best as I can. This is definitely going to have more texture than a normal prosthetic would, but you work with what you've got. I'm then going to be laying down a little bit extra liquid latex before rolling out a piece of cotton and applying that right under the eye to simulate eye bags. You then want to apply a little bit more liquid latex over top of that to help seal that off. We're then going to be creating the nasolabial folds, so in order to do that, you want to roll out a long piece of your cotton ball and just lay that down, going from the corner of your nose down to the edge of your jawline, and then you want to seal that off using some more liquid latex. And then we're going to lightly build up the very far end of the jawline as well. Next, we're going to be building up the nose piece, so I'm just going to be laying down some liquid latex, applying a small amount of a cotton ball, and then just lightly building up the ball of the nose. Keep in mind, Thanos actually does have a reasonably small nose, but it is still bigger than the one I currently have, and he does have relatively large nostrils, so I'm mostly using this to just kind of help build up that entire area, but still maintain a realistic look. Next, we're going to be building up the brow area. I'm going to be laying down some liquid latex, laying down a piece of cotton, once again covering that up with some more liquid latex and just beginning to shape that in to the two brow pieces. This is actually relatively similar to my Master Xehanort brow piece, where you have one going upwards and then one coming back down at an angle where your normal brow would normally be. I'm then going to be applying a little bit of latex paste onto the upper lip, and I'm actually going to be adding a few indents going upwards and downwards, and this is going to help line up with the chin piece later on. Speaking of the chin piece, we're going to be applying a little bit of latex paste right onto the chin, and once again you're going to be completing the indents on this as well, taking your spatula in an upwards motion to kind of help simulate those designs. Next, we want to add some emotion lines in between his brows, so I'm just going to be rolling out a few pieces of cotton and applying that there before applying more latex paste to the entire forehead area, taking a finger dipped in latex and just trying to smooth that out. Once that's done, I'm going to be rolling out some pieces of cotton, and this is going to form some expression lines, and definitely make sure to seal this off as well, and you can even make it thinner if you start to hold your spatula at an angle. Now, Thanos' brows do start to turn upward, so I'm going to be laying down two pieces of cotton balls and once again sealing that off just like we did the expression lines. And once again, he does also seem to have a little bit higher cheekbones, so I just want to add that really fast by applying a little bit of cotton and sealing that off with liquid latex. Next, we're going to be moving on to our paint job, where I'm going to be taking my Graftobian Pro Paint and Tickled Pink, watering this down and just stippling this on all over the prosthetic piece once we allowed it to dry overnight. Now, if you look at reference photos of Thanos, he has a very ashy shade of purple where he has a lot of pink undertones shining through, so that is what we're trying to simulate here, but we don't want him to literally look pink, so we want to then spray it with some water and literally diffuse the crap out of this. I will then be taking my Graftobian Pro Paint and Wild Violet and just stippling this all over the entire prosthetic piece. Following that, I'm going to be taking my Mare on Paradise Paint in Black and just using this to fill in the nostril area before spraying the crap out of the prosthetic piece once again and diffusing it with my brush. I'm then going to be taking my Graftobian Pro Paint in Graveyard Gray, and this is going to be your best friend throughout this entire tutorial because this is a really great color to use to diffuse all of this vibrant color. I will then be taking my Graftobian Pro Paint in Eggplant, and I'm going to use this to contour Thanos' face. This is mostly going to be around his jaw and chin area, and then up at the far tippity top of his forehead. I'm then going to be taking my Johnson's Baby Powder and just set the entire prosthetic, so we can then move on to using eyeshadows. I'm going to be taking my Morphe and James Charles Unleash Your Inner Artist palette, mixing the black and the purple eyeshadow and using this to contour the areas that we used Eggplant to contour with, just to really help set and deepen those areas, and also apply this around the nose area as well, and also making sure to bring those vertical designs up on the chin and in the eye socket area. I'm then going to be taking my Maryland Paradise paint in black, and using this I'm really just going to define those lines that we made in the chin so that they are a little bit nicer, but they still have that shading from the black eyeshadow. I'm then going to be going into this magenta purple color and applying this to the highest points of the chin prosthetic before taking my polyacrylic on a Q-tip and applying this all over the prosthetic piece. Now, something to keep in mind is this is really going to help give it a nice glossy finish, but it is a water-based finish, so it is actually going to lift some of the body paint, but in my personal opinion, I actually like the way that this looks because it's going to help kind of bring out those undertones that we're going to end up painting over later on, but it's still going to help reveal them and that you're going to still be able to see through it with body paint later on. Next, I'm going to be going back into my baby powder, and we're going to be removing this from the life cast. So in order to do that, I want to completely coat this with baby powder, start to lift the edges, and make sure to apply baby powder underneath the prosthetic as you start to lift it up so that both sides are completely coated and sealed. And hello everyone, we have finally made it to the application process. I wish we could have just snapped our way here, but unfortunately that's not the way life works. So to get started, we're going to be taking our Skin Saver Barrier Lotion and applying this all over our face and leaving some time to have a little home alone moment. I'm then going to be taking my petroleum jelly and applying this into my eyebrow hairs and also sweeping that through my eyelashes as well, making sure to also apply this into my hairline. I'm then going to be taking my BGE Medium Latex Bald Cap, putting this on my head, and then we're going to be trying to cut the edges, but unfortunately, I don't have any working scissors apparently. I literally just feel like the Fates from Hercules with the scissors that don't cut the string. That's me with the bald cap, so I had to go find a third pair of scissors that would finally cut through the latex. So you just want to cut out areas for the ears, then take some spirit gum, apply this around the forehead area, and then on the sides of the face by the temples. Next, we're going to be applying the prosthetic piece to our face. So in order to do this, I'm taking some Pros-Aide on a Q-tip, applying it sporadically onto my face and bald cap, and also applying it sporadically on the prosthetic piece itself, focusing mostly on the edges. We're going to wait for that to get tacky before pressing that onto our face. I'm then going to be mixing some Cavasil and Pros-Aide together so that we can make Bondo, and I'm going to be applying this to the edges of the eye area and the mouth area as well so that the edges will blend into our skin. I'm then going to be taking my Graftobian Pro Paint in Wild Violet, and using this, I'm going to be applying this around the eye area. I also mixed it with a little bit of my Graveyard Gray just so it has a lighter hue and so it's not too intense. I'm then going to be going in with just my Wild Violet, and using this, I'm going to be applying this all over the areas of the bald cap that you can still see, and even bringing this down my neck as well. Next, we're going to be taking our Graftobian Pro Paint and Eggplant, and we're going to be using this to contour the face just like we did whenever it was on the life cast. Something that's really great about this piece is that this requires a lot of layering. This also is something that you need to be very patient with because it doesn't happen very quickly. I thought that this would be a tutorial that would, go by really fast, but I ended up tripling the time because of all of the detail that is required for this look and just the time it takes to build it up. If you think it's not looking great, just keep pushing and it will end up looking like how you want it to. It just takes time for you to find out what exactly is missing. Speaking of layering, we actually need to go back into our Graftobian Pro Paint in Graveyard Gray and just apply this sporadically throughout the prosthetic piece where we find that things are a little bit too vibrant and they need to be muted a little bit more. Next, I'm going to be going back into my Morphe James Charles palette, taking a blue eyeshadow and just using this to contour, and this is really going to be great to help with color dimension throughout this look. I'm also going to be going back into the black eyeshadow and really help deepen up those smile lines. Taking my Graftobian Pro Paint in Graveyard Gray with my Wild Violet, I'm then going to be using this around the mouth area to help lighten that up a little bit, and going back into my black eyeshadow and applying this to the very center of the lips. We're also going to be applying this around the eye area, bringing that up to the temples and the forehead pieces as well. Like I said, this look requires a lot of layering because you really need to work to try and get that color right. Mine still ended up being a little bit too dark, but that's kind of just what happens whenever you're trying to contour and highlight, and you still need to maintain a lot of detail work. I'm going to be going into my Mare Paradise Paint in Black, and using this, I'm going to be applying this to the lip area and just making sure to mostly apply it to the very center of the lip to try and elongate it. I'm then going to be mixing my Graftobian Pro Paint in Tickled Pink with my Mare Paradise Paint in White, and I'm going to be using this to highlight the chin piece area and even bringing this up onto my lower lip because Thanos does have a highlight on his lower lip as opposed to his upper lip. Next, I'm going to be taking my Mare Paradise Paint in Black and mixing that with some of my Graftobian Pro Paint in Graveyard Gray, and if you look at really closely at reference photos, he actually seems to have a little bit of stubble, or at least the indentations of stubble, so I'm just going to be using a black coarse sponge to replicate this look. I'm then going to be mixing my Graveyard Gray with my Wild Violet, and we're going to be highlighting under the eye area and even bringing that up onto the brow bone as well. Next, I'm going to be going into my Wild Violet body paint, and using this, we're going to start to create the line work that he has on his face. He seems to have about 3 or 4 lines, and we're just going to bring that upwards and even define the temple ones as well. I'm then going to darken his under eye area a little bit by mixing some of my Graveyard Gray with my black paint, and this is just going to be a light shadow that we're going to have under the eye area before going back into our Mare Paradise Paint in Black and just really creating those bags under his eyes. I will then be taking my Makeup Forever Artist Color Pencil in Dimensional Dark Brown and just tightlining my lower waterline before going back into my Graftobian Pro Paint in Tickled Pink and mixing that with some white, and we're going to be using that to highlight all of the lines on his face. I'm then going to be using my black body paint again to once again elongate his mouth because it was looking really small, and if you look at reference photos, he actually has a very large mouth, and I guess it's to pair with his large chin, so you just want to elongate that and thicken the mouth line a little bit more while still keeping the edges a little pale, and especially the lower one as well. Then taking my black body paint, I'm just going to be darkening up and adding a few lines to the face that I seemed to miss before. He has 2 lines going up towards his cheekbones and also 1 down by his jawline. I'm also going to be intensifying the bags under his eyes. I found that this actually really helped out with pulling the look together, and in doing so, you also need to highlight the under eye as well with that color, and I also went ahead and did the lip area as well. We're then going to quickly go back into our black body paint, and using this, we're going to define the chin lines one last time, making them look as thin and sharp as possible. And when doing this, we also need to highlight one last time, so that's where we combine our Tickled Pink and our white body paint together and just highlight in between those lines. And that is the completed Thanos armor and makeup tutorial. I really appreciate you guys watching. Leave a comment down below which Avengers inspired makeup look was your favorite and what videos would you like to see from me in the future. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!